Alright guys, so I'm back. So what I was talking about was with criminal law, all the laws have to be written down. Any written law is called a statutory or like a statute law. It's set in stone, it's written down. Okay, now what you'll kind of be ringing through your head, wait a second, well what does that mean? Let's look at, for example, the crime of rape. You hear people talk about statutory rape versus rape. Well, rape is what everybody agrees is rape, and the violent, the horrible crime, okay, that's always been wrong, that's always been illegal. Then you have this element that's the statutory element of it, okay, and what that means is these are the things that have changed over the last 30 years that have been written into laws as our society has decided these are not allowed, but originally they weren't really viewed that way. Some of it's technology, some of it's changes to society. So you have two elements to statutory rape. You have the age element. So it used to be 200 years ago, you get married at 13, 14, 15, there was no age issue. Okay, well in the last 30, 40 years, we've kind of said, wait a second, it's really not good for a 13-year-old to be in a relationship with a 25-year-old or a 50-year-old or whatever. So we've created all these laws of what the age limit is for you to be in a physical relationship with somebody. Okay, so most states have what we call the 2-year rule. And what the 2-year rule is, and this is what Ohio's rule is too, is that you can date somebody, no problem. But physical relationships have to be within 2 years if one of the parties is under 18. So what that means is 18-year-old can date a 16-year-old and do some stuff. 19 and 17, 20, they have to be 18 or older. Okay, there's no question about that in the eyes of the court, and it's set in stone. This is not something everybody agrees about, because you've had some people that are like, well, what's the difference between a 21-year-old and a 17? They're both pretty much adults. But that's not what the law sees, because there's an element of the age being manipulation, people using different things, okay? And we just don't allow that anymore. This isn't always the case. Most of these laws go back to the 90s and even early 2000s when it comes to that. There's some states that are debating the laws of, well, should there be an age limit between people that are under the age of 18? What about that 17-year-old senior hitting on that 14-year-old freshman? Is there an element there that should be legally wrong and prevented so that the forces, police force and the other agencies in the school can step in and say, nope, you can't do that? Not everybody agrees on that line. Okay. The other area of statutory rape comes into what I would call the manipulation of sex. And what that means is we saw a huge uptick with colleges and fraternities and partying and stuff like that in the 70s and the 80s, where people started using alcohol and drugs to get somebody so inebriated that they would agree to do something that when they were sober they would have said no to. So whether it's roofies in a drink, whether it's too much to drink, you get somebody that you just met and you sit there and they're so out of it that they go along with whatever. Well, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, no, you did. That's a crime. Okay, now, but we didn't start making those a crime until the 1980s and 1990s. Some of it was because some of those drugs weren't invented yet, and we didn't see them become issues. Some of it was we didn't realize the problems that were tied to that. Hey, so, and this is something that's big, especially when you guys go to college and stuff like that. If alcohol here in Ohio, if either person is under the influence of any type of drug or alcohol, it is technically illegal, and you could be charged with rape, a statutory rape, if you have sex with them. But step back a second. In those situations, somebody has to file a complaint. So if two 35-year-olds are on their anniversary, they have too much to drink, they have relations overnight, neither one of them is going to the cops. This is going to apply when you meet somebody that you don't know and they get to the point where they're inebriated and the next morning they wake up and realize that they did something that they did not want to do. That is illegal. So you always need to be responsible for yourself in those situations. Then you have the next level of manipulation. When it comes to authority structure. And this could also be kind of tied to the age thing a little bit, but you have situations where bosses or people in a authority structure they use their power to kind of make innuendos or suggestions that you have to perform or do something in order to keep your position, get promotions, those kind of things. Okay. In the past, sexual harassment wasn't viewed as an issue. Nowadays, we have many different levels of sexual harassment and what we consider rape. This also falls into if you're in a situation where you hop in somebody's car, they drive you around, you go on a nice date, you go to dinner, they drive you out in the middle of nowhere, and they basically make it known that unless you want to walk back, you have to do something to earn the ride back. Okay, that's all manipulation, and that's what we would call date rape, statutory rape, those kind of things. You didn't really have the choice. And that's what we've really started viewing as the issue. And so those are examples where everybody knew what rape was. Nobody ever questioned that in history, violently doing that. But all these things where people lost the ability to say no or chose to say no because they felt like they didn't have any other choice, those have become issues. So the next level that we're dealing with right now that people are questioning is, if you're married, can you say no? If one of you is not in the mood and the other one forcefully does something because that's what they felt like doing at that time period. Right now, that's, our society, we're starting to say very, very clearly that's rape. You always have the right, regardless if you're married, regardless if you're in a relationship, regardless if you don't know them, you always have the right to say no. But that's not always been the case. And in some cultures and some societies, you don't say no once you're married. You don't have that option anymore. You lose that, and that's something that's being debated in the world stage more than it is here in the United States. But you could see cases prosecuted now that 25, 30 years ago would have not been an issue. Okay, so that's what we're talking about with statutory. And you have different things that go into place. Murder's not just murder. When it comes to criminal laws, there's a lot of gray areas of I plan, I calculate, I organize to commit the crime of murder versus I walk home and I see my wife with the neighbor and I lose myself in the moment and pull out a gun and shoot both of them. Those are two different levels compared to an accident that I should have known better, but I didn't intend to kill somebody. And that's where you see like drunk driving. You should have known better. It's illegal. You shouldn't be doing it. But nobody drinks and drives with the intent of killing people. They just, because they're drunk, they don't realize what they're doing and they do something they shouldn't be doing. Doesn't mean it's still not a crime, but it changes up the punishment, the level. Okay, so like the death penalty is only available if you know what you're doing, plan on it, organize it, and then carry it out. Okay, if it's a crime of passion in the moment because something happens and you snap, if it's a crime where you were doing something else you shouldn't have been doing but you didn't intend to hurt anybody and you end up doing, you can go to jail. You can go to jail for a very long time in those situations, but you're not going to get the death penalty. So we have different layers, and that's where you hear things like first degree and second degree and third degree, or grand theft versus theft or petty theft. Those kind of things come into play. Okay, and that's all tied into that criminal law of what's going on with the different levels, but it's all going to be statutory based or written in there, and the different levels are going to be played out through the courtroom system. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I know I let in a little detail there, and hopefully nobody got uncomfortable, but I just want to make sure you understand what that means and how it plays out in reality. Okay, so when you look at the federal judiciary and you look at some of the different things that are going on, okay, we have some controversy. Okay, a lot of people disagree on whether or not our society should be built on the way of standing to sue, the disputes. Should it always be, well, I'm just going to sue you? Because in our country, you can file a lawsuit for anything. It doesn't mean you're going to go anywhere, but because of that, lawyers are always willing to take your case. People are always willing to fill the paperwork. It pays the bills. Other countries, they have different rules. Some countries have a rule that if you file a lawsuit and you lose, you have to pay all legal bills for yourself and the person you sued. We don't have that rule. Would that cut down on the lawsuits if you knew that if you filed a lawsuit and you lost, that not only would you pay for your legal bills, you'd also have to pay for their legal bills? You might see some people with frivolous lawsuits go ahead and cut back on what they're doing. Okay, people kind of copycat and come up with some crazy stuff. For example, there's a gentleman a few years back who sued. He was suing in a situation where he got divorced. And he decided that the reason he got divorced was he became addicted to television. Specifically, he became addicted to adult programs involving nudity, those kind of things, your late night programs. And so he sued the cable company, saying that the cable company ruined his marriage and was responsible and owed him money for costing him his marriage because of the programming that they aired. The judge looked at that, threw that out. Same thing on McDonald's. People have sued McDonald's saying that eating their food caused them to be fat. The judge has thrown that out, saying, no, you're responsible for what you eat. Now, that's different than the cigarette companies. Cigarette companies got sued for causing lung cancer and causing people to die. And where that's different is, one, cigarettes were sold as a healthy product, and they lied when they knew that they were doing something dangerous, and they were selling them something that could cause health issues, but they denied it. Fast food restaurants don't do that. And then the other part of it is cigarette companies inserted addictive chemicals to make sure that you lost the ability to say no and you would keep buying their product. Okay, unless McDonald's starts putting heroin into their French fries, you can't sue them because you eat too many French fries. Now, if they do that, that'd be a different ballgame. If they put something in the grease that made it where you wouldn't say no. Okay. And then when you look at the courts and you look at what's going on, they are very reluctant to hear disputes based on whose power. So if you remember, I was talking about with the Constitution or judicial review, that they're deciding if something is constitutional, unconstitutional. They're only deciding about that aspect. And there's a fine line that they are trying to avoid of making rulings that tell the president, this is how you have to do this job. This is telling the Congress, this is how you have to do their job. Okay, they'll tell you, no, you can't do that. That is unconstitutional. They will tell you, yes, that action is allowed, and it is constitutional. But what they don't want to do is get in a position where they're saying, this is how you need to do it. Okay, so they are very reluctant to hear any cases that can put them in a position where it's not clear what they're saying. They want it to be as clear as day that, gay marriage is legal, gay marriage is illegal, whatever that ruling is. Obviously this summer they made the ruling that gay marriage is legal. They didn't tell the president how he has to enforce it. They didn't tell the Congress what they have to do to enforce it. That's the kind of cases that they want to hear, okay, and that they want to rule on because they don't want to overstep their bounds. And then you have resisting with foreign policy. It's very clear in the Constitution that foreign policy is a presidential power that is split with checks and balances to the Congress. So they do not get involved unless it's a clear-cut constitutional question. They don't want to get involved because they should not, and they know they should not from the Constitution, have any involvement in foreign policy. So they're very careful about getting involved in anything like that. And it's the same thing with the economy. Our Constitution does not talk about the economy. The economy is not addressed in any way, shape, or form. And because it's not in the Constitution, the federal judiciary feels like they have nothing to base their decisions on. They're very, very reluctant to make any decision, figure out any decision, talk about economic questions, because the Constitution does not address that in any way, shape, or form. That's something that's been very, very clear. Okay, so hopefully with these notes, you're good to go. You understand them. When I'm back tomorrow, we're going to go over the second part of the notes. We'll do that in person. Ask me questions. Write down any questions that you have from these notes. At this point, you guys should have about 15 minutes or so, give or take a little bit, left in class. Mr. Wolf can go back and pause the video and let you copy down any of the notes that you weren't able to copy. Hey, you can work on other things. If you didn't watch, I'm sitting here as I'm doing this right now, watching the news, and Clinton's winning big. Bernie Sanders won 1 state so far. Clinton's won 7. Trump's won 5 states. Ted Cruz has won 1. So it's looking like, barring a sudden change in the rest of the evening, Rubio's really struggling and not doing what he needs to do. Clinton is doing exactly what she needs to do to end this race, because the only state that Sanders has won is Vermont. And then Trump is doing what he needs to do. Unless Cruz wins the rest of the states, it's not going to be an issue. Okay, so hopefully you guys paid a little bit of attention to that. If you got any questions about some of that stuff, feel free to ask Mr. Wolf, or you can ask me tomorrow. But by doing this, everything's still on for the rest of the week. Tomorrow we'll do the second part of the notes. Friday is the reading test. Monday is the unit test. Okay. If you need to send me any questions through email, or you need to send me any questions through Remind 101, feel free to do that. I'll answer the specific details of that. But hopefully everything's going well. You guys had a good day, and I'm out. Peace.